we need the president and the administration to be transparent, because right now we have 17 U.S. service members who have been killed, but the new reporting is that nearly 100, or was it 100 service members have been injured in the past 2 weeks. And we're just now learning about it today because reporters are telling us that, not the government. That's a problem.
Hey, welcome back in. Grab a drink, this one's worth sitting down for. CNN's Sara Sidner drops a brand new poll on the table showing most Americans have already decided this war wasn't worth it, and the panel splits down the middle in seconds. Elizabeth digs in and defends the mission. Christine takes every promise apart piece by piece. Stephen quietly admits something that undercuts his own argument, and then Keith closes it out with a set of numbers about American service members that nobody in charge had bothered to say out loud. Stay locked in through the whole thing, because that last stretch is the part everybody's been talking about, and I've got a lot to say about it. Also, tell me where you're tuning in from down in the comments. This channel reaches some wild corners of the map, and honestly, it's my favorite thing to scroll through. Okay, here we go.
Elizabeth, I want to start with you. You have Maria Bartiromo, who is very friendly towards Donald Trump, contending with this idea that at one point in this war, people were told, look, we obliterated their Navy, we took out most of their military capabilities, and yet you're seeing service members die, and you're seeing them being able to lash out at places like Jordan in the region. How do you respond?
Look, I think first and foremost, we have to say that all of us here agree that this loss is horrific, right? U.S. loss like this is awful. We all mourn these lives. We all know that they're doing the impossible. They're signing up for something none of us could probably fathom. I know it's hard enough for me to sit here with you all compared to, what they sign up to do. These are American heroes. And I think we're all sitting here wondering what this means moving forward. I believe the president when he says that they're going to strike them now 10 times harder than they could have otherwise. I believe that he means business. He always has. But when you take American blood like this, there's really no other response. I think the entire country agrees with Maria. Maria's a friend. I know that when she looks at this, she wants to know that Iran is actually obliterated in the way that they can never react like this ever again. They never have this capability. But for them, it doesn't mean that their Navy wasn't, for a fact, obliterated. It means they're using every last missile that they have to try and, bring up American pain. That's what they do. It does not mean we're not stronger than them. It doesn't mean we shouldn't celebrate American victories. It means that this war is going to go on, which I think is unfortunate. It means we have a real task on our hand to either get a deal in place that's better than Obama's deal or obliterate the Iranian regime once and for all. And I would hope that we can all be united in that.
Do you think that we're in a scenario where we're in a quagmire now, where we can't find a solution and it's just tit for tat, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth?
Well, I think when you have a conflict like this that's gone on for 47 years, you know the solution. The solution is to obliterate a regime that wants the death of all American lives. That's the only solution, or a deal that's put in place that makes sure that future American generations never have to worry about a nuclear Iran. You brought up that polling. I don't know if that's fair to compare conflicts, considering Americans have a bad taste in their mouth. Maybe, they should, considering we had a 20-year conflict that we were in. They don't want to see that happen. Again, I'm more curious to see what polling looks like after this conflict is behind us, knowing that it was taken care of in a much less time, hopefully a stronger fashion, and again, made sure that Americans were safe for generations to come.
Christine, I do want to ask you about this, because one of the things you're pointing to, comparing it to other wars, and I think one of the things that Americans learned as they watched these wars go on and on and on and on is that they didn't feel in the end that they were worth it. They were worth the lives of those soldiers, the pain of the families, and the ultimate result. I mean, the Taliban is now in charge of Afghanistan. After 20 years. So their taste for war is low. But the president himself had promised no more forever wars. And I think a lot of people looked at that, and that may be reflected in those numbers. How do you see it, Christine?
This is where the entire argument collapses, and it collapses inside one sentence. Elizabeth said this: "It doesn't mean that their Navy wasn't for a fact obliterated. It means they're using every last missile that they have." Sit with that for a second. Something cannot be destroyed and still be firing. That is not a talking point, that is basic logic. And the reason it matters so much is that ordinary people were told a job was finished. They were told they could exhale, and now they are watching that relief get quietly walked back while families are burying people. You have to understand why Sara Sidner's question landed so hard. Sara Sidner said this: "We obliterated their Navy. We took out most of their military capabilities, and yet you're seeing service members die." That is not a gotcha. That is placing the promise next to the outcome and letting everybody look at both at the same time. Then came the part that really got me. Elizabeth said this: "They're going to strike them now 10 times harder than they could have otherwise. 10 times harder than more." What exactly? If the capability was already gone, what is left to hit 10 times harder? Every single time the result fails to match the promise, the answer is always more. More strikes, peace, more force, more of the exact thing that has not worked. That is not a strategy. That is a reflex. And watch how fast the ground shifts the moment the numbers come up. Elizabeth said this, "I don't know if that's fair to compare conflict considering Americans have a bad taste in their mouth." Translation, please stop looking at the polling. When your strongest response to public opinion is that the public is comparing unfairly, the argument is already over. Americans are not confused here. They lived through the last two versions of this movie, and they recognize the opening credit.
An interesting fact in these polls, the support for this war has plummeted very quickly, as opposed to Iraq and Afghanistan, where it took much longer for people to lose faith and lose support in the war. I think people really see that the president went in without a clear plan. When he did then articulate a plan, one thing was regime change. We now have a leader who is more committed to killing Americans than the prior supreme leader. Two, it was to, obliterate their nuclear capability, which we had said we had done, but then didn't do, and to, obliterate their military capacity, which clearly we haven't done if soldiers are continuing to die at the hands of the Iranians. I think people are so quickly dissatisfied because they know we didn't go in with a plan, we shouldn't have gone in, and going in without a plan means you don't really have a plan to get out. And in addition to the impacts you articulated, it's also having an impact on the American economy, with gas being back up to $4 and more in some places, and diesel being back to $5. So people are feeling hit, and Americans are willing to sacrifice for the good of the country and the good of the world. And no one wants Iran to have a nuclear weapon, but their sacrifices, I think the polls show, they feel are for naught, because there really isn't a plan. And every time the president says we've had a victory, it turns out not to be true.
Steve, when you look at this, how much of what you see in the polling and just the feeling of Americans that this isn't worth it has to do with the economy, has to do with the direct effects to their lives?
Nobody likes paying $4 a gallon for gasoline. And remember, we had the lowest gasoline prices in 50 years back in January and February. So clearly that's part of this, and food prices too have been affected. If you had asked me that question, that poll question that Americans were asked, my answer would be predicated on whether we've taken out their nuclear capability. And if we have, and I don't know what the truth is, but if we have, then I would say it's worth it. But if we haven't, then it's hard to see what we've achieved here. So I think it's sort of premature to judge this yet, because, look, the impact of taking out their nuclear capability is massive for civilization.
Here's the part that blows my mind. Christine said this, "The support for this war has plummeted very quickly, as opposed to Iraq and Afghanistan, where it took much longer for people to lose faith." That single detail tells you everything. It took years for the country to sour on the last two. This one took weeks. That is not people being impatient. That is people being experienced. An entire generation grew up watching declarations of victory age badly, and now they can smell it early. You cannot run the same play on an audience that already knows the choreography by heart. Then Christine put her finger on the actual failure. Christine said this, "We shouldn't have gone in, and going in without a plan means you don't really have a plan to get out." That is the sentence I want everybody watching to hold on to. An entry plan is easy. Anybody can start something. The hard part, the part that separates serious leadership from improvisation, is knowing what the ending looks like before the first strike ever happens. There is no exit written anywhere in this. There never was. And Christine said this too. Every time the president says we've had a victory, it turns out not to be true. Once is a mistake, twice is a pattern. At a certain point, the announcements stop functioning as information and start functioning as weather. But the most revealing moment in this whole stretch did not come from anybody criticizing the war. It came from Stephen, who was leaning toward defending it. Stephen said this, and I don't know what the truth is. Stop. That is a man on national television arguing this might be worth the cost, openly admitting he cannot verify the one thing the entire justification rests on. If the people making the case cannot confirm the case, what exactly is the country being asked to trust?
Keith, when you look at this, is it possible that all of this in the end will actually end up hurting Iran because other nations are being attacked by them that's sort of in the region, and they're looking at other ways to try and get oil to people without going through the Strait? So ultimately, in I don't know how many years' time, do you see this as being an ultimate downfall, if you will, for Iran and its whole
Well, I mean, it's
region?
already hurting Iran, but it's hurting the United States too. And that's the problem. I mean, you can't bomb somebody for months and months and expect it to have no impact on them. It did have an impact on Iran, but it didn't have the desired impact. President Trump said he wanted to have regime change, or he wanted to have unconditional surrender. He was going to help the people of Iran. He was going to obliterate their nuclear program, which he already said he did last year, which he didn't. And we're going to create a better deal. It was better than Obama's deal, and they created a ceasefire agreement. It was worse than Obama's deal and paid him off. And so the American people are understandably frustrated because we've been through this before. We've seen this movie before. We saw it in Iraq. We saw it in Afghanistan. And we don't want to see it again. And the president isn't being transparent. So I agree with Stephen about the idea that we need the president and the administration to be transparent, because right now we have 17 U.S. service members who have been killed. But the new reporting is that nearly 100, or was it 100 service members have been injured in the past 2 weeks. And we're just now learning about it today because reporters are telling us that, not the government. That's a problem.
Keith did something in this closing stretch that almost nobody does on live television. He took every promise, lined them up, and checked them off one by one. Keith said this: "You can't bomb somebody for months and months and expect to have no impact on them." Such a simple observation, and it is the exact thing that keeps getting skipped. Force always produces a reaction. The question was never whether there would be damage. The question was whether that damage would buy anything. And months later, not one person on that panel could name what was actually bought. Then Keith hit the line that should have ended the conversation. Keith said this, which he already said he did last year, which he didn't. A goal was announced as accomplished. It wasn't. Then it quietly became a goal again. That is not a small bookkeeping error. That is a country being told a chapter was closed while the chapter was still being written. And this is where I get genuinely angry. Keith said this: "Right now we have 17 U.S. service members who have been killed, but the new reporting is that nearly 100 service members have been injured in the past 2 weeks. Nearly 100. And Keith made clear the public only found out because reporters went digging, not from a podium, not from an official statement, from journalists doing a job somebody else should have done first. And here's what people don't realize, because this is an old American story. In 1971, a classified internal study of the Vietnam War became public and revealed that the government's own private assessments had been far bleaker than what the country was being told for years. That is documented history now, not speculation. The lesson was supposed to be permanent. When the reporting coming from the ground stops matching the announcements coming from the top, it is the announcements that need checking." Keith said this, and the president isn't being transparent. Families deserve to know what their people are being sent into. A country cannot consent to something it is not being told the truth about. Wanting fewer flag-draped coffins is not weakness, and asking what the actual plan is before more young Americans get hurt was the most patriotic question anybody on that panel asked all night. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.